Sycamore Road, late summer. The Whitfield family was packing up their whole life, boxes stacked by the door, a rented truck waiting outside. Maple watched from the yard, tail wagging low and easy. She had no idea this moving day was any different from an ordinary one. She watched a child carry the last box out to the truck. Nobody called her name. Nobody clipped a leash to her collar. The engine started. The truck rolled slowly down the gravel road and away. Maple sat quietly in the yard and simply watched it go. Dust settled over the empty driveway. Maple walked back across the yard, climbed the porch steps, and sat facing the closed front door. Night fell, and the house stayed dark. Maple curled up on the top step, waiting for a light that would never turn on again. Morning came. She scratched gently at the door, the same way she always had. No one answered. No one ever would again. A neighbor walked past with her coffee, glanced briefly at the dog on the porch, and kept walking. Someone must own her, she thought. Days passed quietly. The big maple tree in the yard began dropping its first golden leaves. Maple was still sitting on that same porch. Cars passed on the road below her. Every time she lifted her head hopefully. Every single time. None of them ever slowed down. She searched the overgrown yard for anything to eat, nosing through the tall grass. There wasn't much there. She returned to the porch, hungry. The yard filled with fallen leaves, the season turning colder. Maple's coat had lost its shine. She looked thinner than she used to. "And is that the same dog from before?" a child asked her mother. "Probably somebody's dog," the mother said, and they simply walked on. By the time the maple tree stood half bare, Maple had started sleeping underneath the porch instead of out on top of it. The first snow fell in November. Maple pressed herself into the small, dry space beneath the old porch boards, shivering against the cold. Ruth Callahan had walked this rural mail route for 11 years. Lately, she'd noticed the house at the end had stopped getting any mail. One morning on her route, Ruth slowed the truck, catching sight of a thin brown and white dog watching quietly from the sagging porch. She asked a neighbor about the empty house. "Been empty for months," the woman said. "Family just packed up and left one day. Snow kept falling steadily." Maple dug a shallow nest beneath the porch, curling tightly against the freezing cold each long, quiet night. Every day on her route now, Ruth's eyes drifted toward that porch before she'd even reached the mailbox at the end of the road. Maple watched the same blue mail truck pass by at the same time every single day. It never used to matter to her before. One quiet afternoon, Ruth parked at the end of the long driveway. She didn't get out. She simply sat and watched for a while. A hard freeze rolled through overnight, wind rattling the loose porch boards violently. Maple stayed curled tightly beneath them, waiting out the cold. The new year arrived quiet and gray. The maple tree stood completely bare. The house stood empty still. Maple somehow was still. By March, the snow had thinned into mud. Maple came out from beneath the porch more often now, testing the softer, thawing ground. On her day off, Ruth drove back to Sycamore Road in her own truck, off the clock now just to quietly check on her. She set a bowl of food down at the edge of the yard, then stepped back, giving the dog all the space she needed. Maple watched from the porch steps, ears low and cautious, unmoving. The untouched bowl sat there as the evening sun slowly went down. The next day, the food remained untouched. Ruth moved the bowl a little closer to the porch, then left again without saying a word. Maple crept halfway across the yard, sniffing carefully at the air, before turning back toward the safety of the familiar wooden porch. Over the following days, Ruth kept returning, sitting a little closer each visit, asking for absolutely nothing in return from her at all. One quiet afternoon, while Ruth sat calmly a few yards away, Maple finally lowered her head to the bowl and began to eat. Ruth started visiting on her own time now, most evenings after work, always sitting patiently, never reaching for her, never rushing her forward. Maple began listening for a different engine than the family's old car. She started waiting eagerly for the sound of Ruth's truck instead. Ruth brought an old folded blanket and laid it gently near the porch steps, then stepped back and let Maple decide for herself. That night, for the first time in many long months, Maple slept on something soft instead of the bare, cold wooden boards. Ruth let her hand rest quietly near Maple's paw on the step. Maple flinched slightly, but this time she didn't pull away or run. A hard spring storm rolled in fast. Ruth came anyway, hood pulled up, and sat down calmly on the steps as rain poured down. Soaked completely through, Ruth stayed seated on the porch steps beside her instead of leaving. Maple, for once, didn't move away at all. Maple rested her head gently near Ruth's knee for just a moment, before quickly pulling back, as though she'd caught herself doing it. By July, the old maple tree stood full and green again, the very same tree that had once dropped its leaves completely alone. Ruth reached out slowly and rested her open hand flat on Maple's back. This time, Maple didn't flinch or pull away at all. The leaves began turning gold again. Almost a full year had quietly passed since that truck first pulled out of the gravel driveway. One morning, Ruth arrived carrying a new leash and a soft red collar, and sat down calmly at the very bottom of the steps. Maple stood on the porch, looking down at her, at the leash, and at the wide open yard stretching out beyond the steps. For a long still moment, neither of them moved at all. 400 days of waiting stood between that quiet porch and the truck. Ruth didn't pull the leash. She didn't call out to her. She simply stayed there, patient and still, at the bottom of the steps. Then Maple took one small step down, and then another. For the first time in over a year, she finally left the porch. She crossed the yard slowly, passing the faded "For Sale" sign lying flat in the overgrown grass, moving steadily toward Ruth's waiting truck. At the truck, Maple paused and looked back at the old house one final time. Then she climbed inside, and they drove away together. A different house now, small and warm, its porch light glowing gold softly against the deepening blue of the early evening sky. Inside, Maple lay curled by the fireplace on a soft new bed, her coat clean now and slowly beginning to shine once again. Weeks later, she ran freely across a fenced backyard at a healthy weight, ears up high, tail wagging happily behind her the whole time. That autumn, Ruth and Maple sat quietly together on the old porch swing, the one that, this time, actually still worked perfectly fine. Winter came again to Sycamore Road's memory. This time, Maple watched the falling snow from a warm window instead of a cold porch. The front door opened, and Ruth stepped inside. Maple ran to greet her, tail high, because someone was finally always coming back home.